that's how we apparently lose it.
You know, it's an incredible dilemma for a spiritual seeker, and I would include myself in that category. It's like, on the one hand, and I've heard over the years many people talk in a similar way to you. On the one hand, you can't get what you want. On the other hand, you can't not try. It's like you still have to live your life. You still have to follow your heart. You have to follow where you feel life's taking you. And you might go up 1,000 wrong turnings, but you don't have to do it. And that's the amazing adventure of it, really. And it's somehow very inspiring to meet someone like you, although I know you feel there isn't someone there, but to feel that you did all this, and okay, end of the day, something opened, something changed, and your desperation, your unhappiness, your depression dropped away for whatever reason.
But you see, this was seen, the beauty of this, you see, it was seen right in the midst of that despair.
No, well, I can get that, because I've spoken to other people that have been in this situation. I get that,
Yeah. All my life, in all the seeking, I thought the despair was a block. It's like I had to overcome the despair before I could awaken. What was seen as this was already the case, right at the heart of life, right at the heart of what I took to be my life. It was seen that it wasn't mine at all. You know, no matter what was happening in my life, there was that freedom there that could never leave, because it wasn't something that I had. It was something that was there, and it has nothing to do with me. And yet, you see, it's what you were saying. It's like it just sits there. It just sits there and allows the seeking to play itself out. You see, throughout all my seeking and suffering, there had only ever been oneness, just that I couldn't see it. And yet, there had still only been oneness. You see, and yet this whole seeking and suffering game had played itself out perfectly. That was also seen too. That was seen too, that it couldn't have been otherwise. That the seeking had exhausted itself. You know, when it was ready, and really, it had nothing to do with me. And I remember when I saw this, I saw it in a chair. You know, I was in my bedroom at home, and I was looking at a chair, and suddenly, it's like everything fell away, and I realised I'd never seen the chair before, because I was too busy looking for something so much more than the chair, looking for something for me, looking for awakening, liberation, and light, always in the future. So I'd missed the chair. And something funny happens then, you see, in that when that seeking falls away, it's like the chair reveals its secret, that it's oneness, like it's oneness disguised as a chair. And actually it's not a chair at all, you see, that's the thing. We call it a chair. It's like we call it a chair so we don't have to see it. It's like, oh, I know it's a chair, I know it's a table, I know, you know. But when that falls away, it's like it can't be known, you know. It's not a chair at all. It is what it is, and it's very alive. You know, everything becomes very alive. And yeah, we can still call it a chair. We can still use ordinary language. We can still function, you know, as if we were leading a very ordinary life. And yet, underneath, it's all the miracle. It's all the miracle. But the thing is, I always say it's nothing like you thought it would be. It's nothing like you thought it would be. The moment you have an idea of what awakening is, that's just an idea. You know, awakening, it's too alive to ever be captured, to ever be known.
And you had a few of these experiences and there's one in your book you mentioned about how you were walking through the rain in a cold autumn evening in Oxford, and there you say you suddenly realised I was everything, I was home. So presumably these situations arose more frequently, and there's something that got stronger. Is that right? Is that how you felt?
Well, you know, when this was first seen, it was very dramatic. It was very dramatic. It was almost shocking to see that the secret had been with me from the beginning, and it was right at the heart of this very ordinary life, you know. That the extraordinary was always there. It was always hidden in the most ordinary of things. And when that was first seen, there was a great excitement to it. There was a drama about it. It was, you know, and you know, these days it's become very ordinary. The whole thing's kind of quiet. It's gently kind of quieted down. It's become very gentle, very ordinary. It's there in the background, but it's not so dramatic. You know, it's like the whole thing collapses back down into a very ordinary life, on the surface anyway. But certainly at the time there were all sorts of experiences, you know, all sorts of experiences. You know, yeah, I mean, walking in the park on that day, you know, and the rain coming down, and there was just love. That's all there was, and everything was a manifestation of love, you know, and nothing was separate from what I took to be myself. And at the time it was very dramatic, you know. It was very dramatic. It was also new. But really, even that's died away now, you know, even that's died away. It's just become very gentle, very ordinary. Was
there any element of fear when these things happened at all? Anxiety? Or?
Yeah, well, you see, what happens is, you know, it's like the mind falls away and there's just oneness, there's just what is, and it's so clear, it's so obvious, and it can't be known and it can't be spoken of. But it's undeniably the case, you know, and really there's no time to it, and there's no, everything falls away. But then the mind comes back in. And it's then that it begins to talk about it and write about it. And it says, I had an experience. That happened to me. Actually, you weren't there. It didn't happen to you. You weren't there. It's almost out of fear that the mind comes back in and tries to grasp it, tries to put some sort of structure there. You know, the mind craves structure because it's known, it's secure.
See, the reason I asked that was I read this book a few years ago by Suzanne Segal, Collision with the Infinite. I don't know if you know this book. But she had, it would appear, similar experiences to you. And she went through tremendous anxiety for many years. In the end, ironically, she died of a brain hemorrhage. I don't know if that was part to do with the anxiety. But, you know, as you're hinting at, presumably the anxiety is to do with that the mind's still hanging around.
It's still the mind hanging on.
Yeah.
It's almost the last tactic it uses.
Yeah.
It uses the fear tactic, you know. Like there's something to fear, there's something to fear, there's something to fear. Actually, there's just the fear. There's just fear arising. There's nothing to fear.
So, no, that's an interesting subject, fear and anxiety. So where you are, where you live these days, do you have fear and anxiety sometimes? Does it arise sometimes?
I mean, the point is, anything can arise in this. It's just that, I mean, fear, anxiety, not really anymore. I'm not saying they can't arise though, because the point about this is that anything is allowed in this. Fear is allowed in this. Anger is allowed in this. Joy is allowed in this. Sadness is allowed in this. It's like everything is allowed to arise when it arises, but there's just nobody there anymore trying to do anything with it, trying to resist it, trying to fight it, trying to get an identity out of it. And it's almost impossible to talk about, but say that there can be sadness there. You say if, you know, your mother dies, there can be sadness. You know, people have this idea of, you know, this awakened state where you don't feel anything. You know, it's just this empty kind of nothingness and nothing affects. That's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, you know, that's just another idea, it's another concept. This allows everything. Oneness, I mean, how could oneness not? You know, oneness is everything, so everything is allowed in this. So sadness can be there, and when sadness is there, there's sadness, it's undeniable. But there's just nobody there anymore trying to do anything with sadness. And the funny thing happens then, the sadness just lives its own little life and burns itself up in its own time.
So it's not charged at all.
There's no charge to it. There's no charge.
Yeah.
And yet, so in that, sadness is allowed to be fully sad. You know, and it can be seen. It's like in the midst of sadness, or anger, or fear, it can be seen that, you know, there's sadness there, and yet there's no sadness there. And this is a place the mind could never go.
Yes.
The mind could never go. That there's sadness there, but because there's nobody there who is sad, there's no sad person. Actually, the sadness isn't there. Because really, even to call it sadness, there has to be a person there, calling it something, labelling it. So, you know, I mean, it's impossible to talk about, really, and it's impossible to understand.